Hello everyone, today we're looking at the topic of changing the subject of a formula. We're going to start with a very simple example and then build into some slightly more complicated ones. Now, before we start, we need to understand what this phrase or this word subject of a formula refers to. And here I've got a formula which is y is equal to x plus a. Now, the subject of a formula is the variable or the letter that is on its own on one side of the equal sign. So over here, this y is on its own. Therefore, y is the subject of this equation. So y, because it's on its own, is the subject of the formula. Now, if I want to change the subject of the formula, I need to get one of the other letters on their own. And we do this the same way we solve equations. If I wanted to make x the subject, I need x on its own. X is currently with this plus a. So to get rid of plus a, we take away a from both sides. And if we take away a from both sides, we're left with x on its own is equal to y take away a, which we just write actually as y minus a. And now if we look at this, x has now become the subject of our formula. So x is the subject of the formula now because it's on its own, it's been isolated, and there is nothing else on the same side as x. If, however, I wanted a to be the subject, so we start again, x plus a. If I want a to be the subject, I need to get rid of this x. And once again, to get rid of a positive x, we subtract x from both sides. And that would give me a is equal to y minus x. And now because a is on its own, a is the subject of the formula. So subject is just when you have one letter on its own or one variable on its own. So we're going to build on this and move into a few different examples for this. So just to start with, we have a question over here which is b is equal to 4m plus p. And I want to make m the subject of this formula. Now, if we think about this as if it was with numbers and we were trying to make m the subject, let's say, for example, I had 20 is equal to 4m plus 8. If I wanted to find m in this case, I'd want to get m on its own and solve this equation. So when we're solving a question like this, the first thing we do is we want to isolate the term with the unknown in, and we do that by taking away 8 from both sides. And that would give me 4m is equal to 12. And then to finish up, we would divide by 4, and divide by 4, giving us m is equal to 12 over 4, which is in fact equal to 3. We're going to apply the same process for this question above. We still want to isolate the term with the unknown in, which is the 4m. Now, if I want to isolate that, I need to get rid of this plus p from both sides. So I subtract p and I subtract p. Now, that was the same as the subtracting 8. That gives me b minus p is equal to 4m. And then to finish that off, this is the same as what we have here. We divide by 4 to get m on its own. So when we divide both sides by 4, divide by 4, and divide by 4, we get m is equal to b minus p, all divided by 4. And now we can see that m is on its own and has now become the subject of that formula. So if I just rub out what we have below and come to our next example, this is all going to be based on questions which we've seen previously when we are solving equations. So if we have the question where we have y is equal to 5t divided by a, and I want to make t the subject, so t is going to be the subject of the formula right now, we can see y is the subject. Now, with any questions we've seen previously, when we're solving equations and we've got fractions, the first thing is to do is to multiply through by the denominator to eliminate the fraction. So over here, if I multiply by a on this side and multiply by a on this side, I get ay on the left, that's multiplication, is equal to 5t because the a's will cancel out. Now, this is very similar to what I have up here. If I want to get t on its own, if I want to make t the subject, I simply divide both sides by 5, divide by 5, divide by 5, and we get t is equal to a y divided by 5. And now t is the subject because it's on its own, just like over here. M is the subject because it was on its own. So we've seen kind of our key examples, and now we're going to build on this into a few slightly more complicated ones. So I'm just going to move this along over to here, and we're now going to look at this scenario over here. And now we're just bringing in brackets, but again, we're still applying the same principle that we had in the previous question. So what we've got is P is equal to 6 brackets Q minus 2 divided by 5. Now the first thing we can see here is there is a fraction. It's always better to get rid of the fraction first. So if I'm dividing by 5, I multiply both sides by 5, and that gives me 5P is equal to 6 brackets Q minus 2. Now for this question, I'm trying to make Q the subject. So if I'm trying to make Q the subject, I've got a set of brackets here. Now I could actually divide by 6 here because all of this is being multiplied by 6, or I can expand the brackets. I generally recommend expanding the brackets. So if you expand, you get 6Q minus 12 is equal to 5P. And now if we're trying to get 6Q as our subject, we need to isolate the term with the unknowns. We want the 6Q on its own. So we need to get rid of this minus 12. So we add 12 to both sides. That gives me 5P plus 12 is equal to 6Q. And then finally, if we want Q on its own, we simply just divide both sides by 6. Divide this by 6 and divide this by 6 gives me Q is equal to 5P plus 12, all divided by 6. And that's our final answer there. So we've just done this the same way we solve an equation. We've eliminated our denominator, we've got rid of our fraction, we've then expanded brackets and then rearranged. Now there are two final examples I want to look at, which are again a little bit more complicated, but again just focus on the way in which we do questions when we are solving in this way. So the first one we're going to look at, I'm just going to once again move this example to the right hand side, and the first one we're going to look at is this one over here. Now you'll notice that for this one, this looks actually very similar to one of the earlier ones, but I've actually brought in a negative x for this question. So we can see that the minus 2x in this case is negative. Now, my recommendation when we were solving an equation is anytime you have a negative unknown, you should try to make it positive. So the way in which you can make this positive is to get rid of a minus 2x from one side, we add 2x to both sides. Now, if you add 2x to both sides, we get y plus 2x on the left is equal to 5, because this minus 2x and plus 2x cancel out. This is now one of the same scenarios we saw earlier, where if we're trying to make x the subject, we want to isolate the term with the x in, which is the plus 2x, which means this y needs to be removed from this side by subtracting y and subtracting y. That gives me 2x is equal to 5, take away y, and then to finish up, the last step is simply to divide both sides by 2, which gives us x is equal to 5 minus y divided by 2. So once again, similar steps to what we've seen previously. We want to make our unknown positive, so we take it to the left-hand side by adding 2x to both sides. We then rearrange accordingly in the same way in which we solve equations. So, very, very last example now. We've looked at questions with fractions. We've looked at questions with negative unknowns. The last one we look at is a question with unknowns on both sides. Now, the subject in this question isn't clear because there's no unknown on its own in this situation. So I'm going to give us we're going to do two things. We're going to first make B the subject, and then we're going to make A the subject. Now to make B the subject, I very simply, somebody is in green, to make B the subject. Right now I just need the B on its own, which means I need to get rid of this 3A. I can do that by subtracting 3A from this side and from this side. Now if I subtract 3A from both sides, I get B is equal to 5A, because 8A minus 3A is 5A plus 7. Here we can clearly see that B is the subject. Now, if we try that again, but this time make A the subject, the problem we can see is that I've got unknowns on both sides. I've got A's on both sides. I've got 3A on the left and 8A on the right. Now, if you've got unknowns on both sides, you normally want to eliminate the smaller unknown. If I subtract away 3A from here and subtract 3A from here, I end up with B is equal to 5A plus 7, which is exactly the same thing I had above. But now, if I want to make A the subject from this, I only have one unknown now, which makes this much simpler. So I just follow my usual process, which is isolating the term with the unknown. We then subtract 7 from both sides. That gives me B minus 7 is equal to 5A. And then very simply, to finish that off, we divide both sides by 5. Divide by 5 here, divide by 5 here. A is equal to B minus 7 divided by 5. So what we've looked at here, once again, are a variety of different examples. Some questions with negatives, some questions with fractions, and some questions with unknowns on both sides. And we do this in the same way in which we solve equations. So that effectively is how you rearrange simple formulae. We will look at rearranging difficult formulae in another video, but I hope it's made sense. If it hasn't, please leave a comment below or message me directly. Thank you very much for watching. Take care and goodbye.